So I've noted this a few times already. If we are going to deal with the current pandemic in a way that would even come close to being called successful, and again, now when we talk about success, we're talking about how much can we limit the number of people who die, because the number is climbing rapidly, and it's a question of limiting that number. Sadly, if we're going to deal with it in anything that would approximate a success, it's going to likely depend on our state governors. It's not going to happen because Donald Trump's direction gives some kind of unified and well appointed, well crafted strategy. And in fact, we're seeing Donald Trump increasingly push in the other direction. It's becoming very much obvious that Donald Trump is all but completely committed to reopening the country, letting it rip, as Dr. Anthony Fauci sort of characterized it, on Easter Sunday, April 12th. Now, it's still possible that the numbers will be so ugly by that point, and we'll look at the numbers later, and it seems to be going in that direction. It's possible that the numbers will be so ugly that Donald Trump will be talked out of it, even by people as incompetent as Jared Kushner, who apparently has a hand in everything. He's supposedly going to be, not only is he going to fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Jared Kushner is expected, I guess, to deal with coronavirus as well, despite having no experience whatsoever in infectious disease. And we've been thinking about how different state governors are likely to react to Donald Trump wanting to let it rip on April 12th. Because remember, still now at nearly the end of March, more than half of state governors have done nothing yet. As of 2 days ago, 30 of 50 states had no state level directives about shutting down non-essential businesses, self-isolation, staying home, schools, etc. Now, many of those states had individual cities that may have made such determinations, but 30 of 50, that's 60%, right? That's 3/5, weren't even doing anything yet. Imagine the insanity of talking about let's open it back up when 30 states haven't yet even closed anything down. It's completely crazy. So when they talk about April 12th, understand that many states, nothing's changed. Those states are just standing by and it's business as usual, which makes this all the more absurd. They're going to reopen from never having closed. But the most important thing here is if there's anything positive, and we're desperately looking for silver linings every day, and there aren't many, it does seem that more and more governors are just not going to follow Donald Trump's direction. They are going to say no to Donald Trump, and they're going to do what's right for their state, which is likely to stay shut down for what is unfortunately a relatively long period of time. We've got New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, clearly not on the same page as Donald Trump and talking about more closures, more limitations as we get into April and eventually going into May. California Governor Gavin Newsom, he's very clearly operating under a completely different sort of set of facts based on the last thing he said, the extension of stay-at-home orders in California. It's going to go for a while. Even in Texas, where Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has been completely unhinged in talking about sacrificing grandparents in order to save the stock market for their grandchildren, you even have the governor there, Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who's pretty bad. He now is at least endorsing the stay-at-home orders that individual cities in Texas have put in place. I know it's not that much. They're doing it anyway. It doesn't change anything that Greg Abbott endorses it, but it is a good sign. And then you've got Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who says public health must come before the economy. Yeah, that's true. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem says business activity must be limited, not relaxed at this time. And in many ways, this is going to become, and it is a story already, about states' rights versus the federal government, which is an issue that is a common political debate. But I certainly didn't expect on day one of this fiasco that one of the greatest determinants as to how this goes was going to be the issue of states' rights versus the federal government. And it probably wouldn't be the issue if we had competent science-based leadership coming from the Oval Office rather than doctors stand on stage, but they basically shut their mouths while Donald Trump brags about this, that, and the other thing that he claims he did, while sometimes during these press briefings, not even talking about the case numbers or the death toll. It's very difficult to imagine now thinking about Massachusetts. I don't see Republican Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker and a lot of other governors jumping on board with April 12, especially when we are hearing about more school closures, more business closures, extending the school closures here in Massachusetts and in other places. And especially when you look at the numbers, which we will look at later, I hope that governors will maintain sanity. Now, interestingly enough, the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, he's going crazy to stop abortions during the coronavirus pandemic, but he's very much welcoming the idea of a wide open on April 12th. We know, of course, that Mississippi's health system is a disaster. We know that the underlying health conditions impact coronavirus mortality rates drastically. It could very quickly get very, very ugly in Mississippi for Tate Reeves. We'll be watching that. And then there are even discussions starting about the possibility of states actually putting in checkpoints at their own borders. Imagine, for example, that you have certain states that are all in with "we've got a distance," whereas other states are all about "let it rip." You could conceivably have state governors wanting to set up checkpoints at their borders, which is a very complicated legal thing to do. In the United States, freedom of movement between states is determined by what's called the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the Constitution. And it is a pretty significant restriction on states being able to erect barriers or block entry to states. Free movement between states is in the Constitution. It's very difficult to do that. If it gets to that point, imagine that Louisiana takes it seriously, but Alabama doesn't or whatever. You could very quickly see that hypothetical conflict become a very real legal conflict in some of these states. Last thing I want to come back to here. From the beginning, right-wing media choosing to entertain Donald Trump's completely delusional perspective on all of this has done such drastic and permanent damage. It has led to nearly half the country, or more than half the country by states, maybe not by population, to essentially believe that this is no big deal, that it is going to kind of just take care of itself. We don't have to do anything. That is a belief that will increase the death toll. The death toll is already higher than it otherwise would be if every state back in whatever the date was, March 15th or so, where more and more states started taking this seriously, had said, we're going to shut the whole thing down. Now, Donald Trump seems increasingly indifferent to the death toll. He instead, during his press conference, talks about stock market, how much money he's going to give businesses, how quickly he can get businesses reopened. No mention sometimes of the death toll. Even of testing, there's barely mentioning sometimes, until Donald Trump now got his hands on this talking point of we've tested more people in 8 days than South Korea did in the previous 8 weeks or something, of course, ignoring the fact that we're a far larger country with many more people. We're in real trouble here. And I'm hoping, because we're desperate for some kind of silver lining, I'm hoping governors will help, except they've got to all get on the same page. And right now they are not. 20 governors doing something, 30 governors doing nothing. Real quick, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Magic Spoon, who have done something awesome. They've taken all of our favorite sugary childhood cereals that we know we shouldn't eat anymore and turned them into something you can actually feel good about eating as an adult. There's 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry. They taste great. They're crunchy. They're sweet like you would expect this type of cereal to be. But it's perfect for a ketogenic diet because one bowl has only 3 net carbs, 12 grams of protein. It's sugar-free, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free. Once our team tried Magic Spoon for the first time, we actually ended up emailing Magic Spoon back and saying, can you send us more boxes? Send more samples. They've been a big hit with David Pakman Show staffers. And Magic Spoon knows how delicious their cereal is because if you don't like it, they'll refund all of your money, no questions asked, and you'll get free shipping when you go to magicspoon.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman. That's Pakman.